And so when the divorce tsunami hit, the so-called no-fault divorce laws, when that struck in 1970, spreading out from California to every state except New York by 1985, it hit a population of Protestants that, theologically at least, had no consistent opposition to the notion of divorce, and at the same time a Catholic population that had been softened by the rebellion against church teaching and the sexual revolution of the 60s. As of 2004, 39% of married Protestants and 25% of married Catholics divorce. The social effect of this has been indescribable. I mean what I'm going to say, but it is doubtful if a full-out nuclear war could have wreaked as much havoc in our beloved country. In 1880, Pope Leo XIII prophetically warned mankind regarding the results of divorce. Listen carefully what the Holy Father has to say. Quote, "Truly, it is hardly possible to describe how great are the evils that flow from divorce. Mutual kindness is weakened. Deplorable inducements to unfaithfulness are supplied. Harm is done to the education and training of children. The seeds of dissension are sown among families. The dignity of womanhood is lessened and brought low. And women run the risk of being deserted after having ministered to the pleasures of men. Divorce tends to the certain destruction of society." Close quote, the Vicar of Christ. All right, now let's quickly turn and consider the misunderstandings about the Marital Act. In 1930, the Church of England broke all historical precedent when it resolved that married couples could lawfully use contraceptives to limit or avoid parenthood. Since then, every other denomination, both Protestant and Eastern Orthodox, has gone along. Until now, at this point, the Catholic Church stands completely alone in condemning contraception. What happened here in the United States? For the sake of time, we'll only briefly consider the legal history. That's only one aspect, but it gives us an overview. In 1930, in the United States, under the Comstock laws, distribution of pornography, contraceptives, and abortifacients were still illegal. In a 1936 case, brought by none other than Margaret Sanger, founders of International Planned Parenthood, in 1936 case, the federal government was forbidden from interfering with contraception distribution by doctors, but they still remained banned by state statutes. In 1965, in a case brought by the woman who's in charge of Planned Parenthood of Connecticut, the Supreme Court struck down the state's right to ban contraceptive distribution to married couples. At the same time, they produced out of nowhere this mythical right to privacy that exists in the shadow or the penumbra or the umber of the Constitution, somewhere that nobody can find it except them. In a 1972 case, the Supreme Court then extended this right to unmarried couples. And then those two precedents were used in the satanic 1973 case, Roe v. Wade, which decriminalized abortion.
One point missing in the timeline is in 1977, Carey versus Population Services made available contraceptives to minors without parental consent, and sex education in schools teaching kids where to obtain these reproductive services, all without their parental consent, which led to massive increases in out-of-wedlock babies, in sexual promiscuity, in fornication among our youth, going from 3% out-of-wedlock pregnancies in the 1930s to 45% out-of-wedlock pregnancies in 2013.
In the 2000 Lawrence versus Texas case, which decriminalized all manner of perversion. Today, virtually all private, non-procreative, non-commercial acts between consenting adults are decriminalized, federally protected behaviors. And should somehow a child be conceived in spite of all the chemical and physical barriers, well, the right to abort that child is also federally protected. The result is this. In our legal system, and certainly in the current understanding of the general public, the Marital Act is A, a form of recreation, B, has no necessary relationship to marriage at all. C, has no necessary relationship to procreation at all. And D, outside pro-life circles, abortion is seen by a great number of people as an unpleasant but unfortunately necessary last-ditch type of emergency contraception. That's where we're at today in these United States. 40 years ago, 1968, Pope Paul VI prophetically warned mankind regarding the result of decriminalizing contraception. Listen carefully to what the Pope has to say. Quote, "Consider, first of all, how wide and easy a road contraception opens up towards conjugal infidelity and the general lowering of morality. Not much experience is needed in order to know human weakness and to understand that men, and especially the young who are so vulnerable on this point, have need of encouragement to be faithful to the moral law, so that they must not be offered some easy means of avoiding its observance. It is also to be feared that the man, growing used to the employment of contraceptive practices, may finally lose respect for the woman, and no longer caring for her physical and psychological equilibrium, may come to the point of considering her as a mere instrument of selfish enjoyment, and no longer his respected and beloved companion. Let it also be considered that a dangerous weapon would thus be placed in the hands of those public authorities who take no heed of the moral law. Who will stop rulers from favoring, even imposing upon their peoples, if they were to consider it necessary, the method of contraception which they judge to be more efficacious?" Close quote, the Vicar of Christ. Leo XIII and Paul VI are absolutely right. Look around out there. What do we see? Latchkey children, lonely, confused, lost youth, despair, drunkenness, drugs, divorce, promiscuity, porn, perversion, Planned Parenthood, paganism, empty parishes, consolidations and parish closures, dying neighborhoods, collapsing social structures, a so-called vocations crisis. All rotten fruits of the culture of death. All rotten fruits of the collapse of the family. All signs of the certain destruction of society. So as we face this culture of death, the question was, how did our beloved country get to this point? How did we become so degenerate? And the answer is, we've rejected the warm and loving hand of God, rejected the natural law and His divine law. Divorce and contraception are not trivial little issues, not by a long shot. If the United States of America were actually run in accordance with the laws of God, it would be absolutely impossible for someone who supported either of these evils to even sit on the board of a mosquito control district. If we were run in accordance with the laws of God. But we're not, by a long shot.